Good afternoon. Shwmai, croeso, welcome to the second of our webinar series in partnership, I suppose, with Text Help and Aspire to Be. I'll introduce Alison shortly, but firstly, myself, my name is Ryan. For those of you joining us who are new to Aspire to Be, we are a learning technology company based in South Wales, affiliated and professional development partner with Apple, Microsoft and Google. My background is very much in special needs. I've got a big passion for inclusion and personalized learning. So I always love partnering and collaborating with the team at Text Help. So that being said, Alison, let's get some introductions from you, please. For those that weren't on the first webinar, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So my name is Alison Woodrow. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's great, as Ryan has said, to be doing this. I work at Text Help. My title is Group School Specialist. We'll not worry too much about that. It basically means if your school is part of any kind of group, an education authority, a multi-academy trust, whatever it might be, I will work with you. And I've been at Text Help now for 5.5 years, I think. We're based in Northern Ireland, as you can probably tell from my voice. And I'm working from home at the minute, as you can probably tell from my background. But I just want to let you know a little bit about Text Help before we get started, because you may or may not have come across us before. We are based in Northern Ireland. We have offices all around the world, but the headquarters are in Northern Ireland, and we've been around for about 25 years. And since our start, the purpose has been this: to help everyone understand and be understood. So from primary education right through to higher ed and right into the world of work, helping people with anything that might be a barrier to them understanding what they need to do and expressing themselves, producing work, whatever it might be. That's what we are here to help with. So we have two divisions, education and workplace. Obviously, I'm in the education division, working alongside skills. So the products that we supply are usually add-ons, easy to deploy add-ons supporting accessibility and learning everywhere that learning happens. So the aim is that we want to provide support to your students wherever they might be working. So should it be in a doc, should it be in slides, in forms, whatever it might be, should it be Google, should it be Microsoft, should it be an iPad, we want to be there to help your students really just reach their full potential and not have anything hold them back. So today, the product that we're looking at specifically is called Equatio, and it is a STEM solution. And about how this is me a little bit out of my comfort zone. My background is languages. I can talk all day about literacy and all of those kind of things. When we get to maths, I start to get a little bit nervous. But actually, I really love Equatio, and I think that's because I can see how useful it would have been to me at school when I was at the stage of having to study maths. So I hope that comes across today. But it's also a little bit of a disclaimer, if I'm honest. I am not a maths expert. I'm not a maths expert. So just bear that in mind as we move through. The title we've given today is Making Maths Visual. And I actually had a guy on Twitter ask me today what that meant. So I hope I can explain this as we go through, and I hope that it's clear what we're trying to do here, which is that we're taking concepts that for some students are so complicated and they're in their head and it doesn't make any sense to them. They don't understand why they would ever need to know this. And we're giving them ways to work it out that makes sense for them. And that's what we mean by making maths visual. How do we take an equation and make it make sense for someone who really doesn't understand what an equation is for? How do we take something like area equals pi r squared, which is one of the examples I'll show you in a minute or two, and show a student what that means in real life, and how do we make sense of it for them and give them the freedom to explore and to find what works for them. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Equatio has currently about 10 million users worldwide. It's always growing. And some of the things that we talk about around Equatio, just as a little bit of an introduction before we get into your questions, are how we're making maths, I've said visual, but also digital and accessible. So maths has been historically a tricky subject to make digital. you know, you've got maybe some very complex thing on your keyboard to help you get a pi sign or a square root sign, whatever it might be, things like that, has been hard to do up until now. So we've provided a number of ways for maths to be input. We've provided prediction tools, we've provided libraries of symbols and terminology. And we've enabled both you as staff and your students to have these very flexible workspaces with lots of tools built in that they can use and you can use to make it a bit fun, but more importantly, just to make it work and to make it make sense. And that's for all levels. So Equatio is not a primary tool. It is for primary, but right up through further and higher education as well. And hopefully I can demonstrate that today as well, while not demonstrating what someone in a first year engineering course might be doing. But I'll hopefully be able to show you how you can build on them. The other thing that we have to take into account, and is very much at the core of what we do at TextHelp, is the students who are in your classroom who have additional needs or extra things that they have to contend with. So we're not, all of those tools are there for all of your students and all of your staff, but you've also got the students with dyslexia, with ADHD, with some kind of visual impairment perhaps, who just maybe need a little bit of extra help. So how have we built tools in that can also help those students? Okay, and just what I mentioned at the very start there was that Equatio will work on Google Chrome, Windows and Mac. Today, I'm going to primarily probably show you Google Chrome based on, I think, what our audience is, but just to make you aware, don't panic. And that means that if you have students who perhaps prefer one particular device or have a different device at home from what they have in school, it also will cover them. They'll be totally covered for all of that. We don't like to brag, but I'm just going to leave this here for a little minute. We did win this award this year at BET. For Equatio as the digital learning product for secondary. So that's just a little, you know, just to let you know. But we're going to move into your questions now. So we've got, I think, how many questions? 7 or 8 maybe?
A number of questions, yeah, a number of questions. And I think, again, for those that didn't join us last time, this is where we hijack the TextHelp YouTube channel now. And just quickly to pick up on, as you mentioned, maths is traditionally a tricky subject. We spoke before we came live today about how neither of us really are maths experts, but have both been able to utilize the functions of Equatio in classroom environments ourselves, whether in a training capacity or in a teaching full-time job. It really is a fantastic tool. I can't stress that how useful it would have been for me even way back when I was in the education system. Maths, if I'm honest, wasn't one of my favorites. By making it visual and fun, you mentioned that it can make maths fun. I think, you know, again, without knocking too many maths teachers, I think it is identified as one of those sort of textbook, old school style subjects. This is a bit of a game changer. So yeah, like I said, hijacked the TextHelp YouTube channel today, and we're flipping our model of normal webinars, where our audience, for those joining us live, welcome, or those catching up on demand who've had an opportunity to send us in some questions, Alison, to pose to you, to allow you to then respond using the solution and the functionality within Equatio. So the question we posed was obviously, what's one thing you'd like to know more of as a result of attending this webinar? Several responses were very general, like with a fortnight ago's webinar, how to use tools to help learners with additional learning needs, special education needs, what apps are available to support, and how do you use these products? You know, what's the best accessibility tools? So there's some very general ones, but we have filtered off all the numeracy based ones for this week's webinar. So the first one then comes in from Sian Williams, who's a numeracy lead in South Wales, year 4 teacher, and simply, I think Equatio has just come onto Sian's radar and wants to know general, what does it do, please?
It's a great place to start.
Yeah.
I know. I'm gonna just walk through what it looks like, a little bit of what the tools are. Obviously, this is not going to be an in-depth demo today because we do have maybe 7 or 8 questions to answer. So if at any point there's something that you would love to know more detail on, you would love to see again, or if you would just love to have a full proper demo, my details were on at the start. They'll be on again at the end. Do just drop me an email and I'm happy to go through it in much more depth than I'll be able to do today. Today is going to be a bit of an overview and hopefully enough to get to whet your appetite and get you a little bit excited about what the possibilities are. Generally, what I find with any of our solutions, to be honest, is that when we show it to teachers, when we show it to Elenkos, to Senkos, whoever it might be, they're instantly going in their head and thinking of all the ways they can already use it. So it's a springboard. It's getting you started, and you'll be able to take it on yourselves without any problems. But so I will have a quick look then at the sort of the general idea behind Equatio. I mentioned a little bit in my introduction there that we talked a lot about making maths digital in the past, and now we're talking more and more, because this is where we see the need, about making maths visual and giving students those multiple means of expression. That's what I talk about a lot, multiple means of expression, that we are providing them with new ways, different ways of expressing themselves. They might have it in their head and they struggle to get it out on paper. How do we help them with that? They might completely struggle with what the concept is. Why would I ever need to know this? How do we help them explore? How do we give them that little bit of independence? We all talk a lot about independent learning and wanting to promote that. How do we help them with that? How do we help them to just engage more with the topics? What sort of tools can we give them to help them do all of that? So I'll give you a bit of an overview of what the toolbar looks like and what some of the options are within it. And then even as we move through the rest of the questions, we're going to see more and more how we can tie all of that together with this whole sort of concept of making it visual. So I'm just going to open just a little maths paper, or a little maths exercise with a few different questions on it. And this is just to give me something to kind of work from. You can see that okay, Ryan? Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep me right. Okay, brilliant. So Equatio is this toolbar along the bottom. So it's quite simple looking. Doesn't have loads and loads and loads of tools, about 8 there. But this is where it all begins. So this is what a student will see when they open Equatio, whether that be as an extension, a Google extension. It's that little diamond shape, the blue diamond shape at the top of my screen, or whether it's the Microsoft one, which is down at the bottom of your screen or on your desktop. That's the symbol to look for, and this is the toolbar that your students will see, okay? And basically, it contains tools to help students both explore and to create maths, okay? So I'm going to start with the first one, which is an equation editor. And this is the sort of the basics of everything, where everything starts from the first thing that your student will maybe want to have a play around with. Basically, equation editor is going to allow you to type any maths you want, as complex as you want it to be. It contains predictive text, and it contains libraries of symbols and favorite banks and all of those kind of things. So this is where it's helping you. It's making it easier for you to access some of those symbols and things that have been tricky to do before. So if I start to type, for example, something like a square root symbol, I can actually start to type the word and you'll see that some options have come up there. So it's predictive text, and that's instantly making that really quick and easy. So whether that's for you creating resources, that'll make it a whole lot quicker and easier. Whether it's for a student who has no idea what the symbol should be, but knows in their head what it is that they want to say. You can do some quite complex stuff. You've got a quadratic formula, for example. You've got things like some chemistry, a little bit of chemistry. If you need what are they called? I've forgotten now. From the periodic table, the symbols, or any of those kind of things, they're all built in there. Or you can just use it really simply to do a simple piece of math. So, for example, 3x plus, whoop, I did that wrong, didn't I? 3x plus, let's try that again. That was my fault. 3x plus 4 equals. And again, you can use the symbols if you know what the symbols are, or you can use the predictive text if you know what it is. And then you simply, once you're ready to insert it, you simply use this Insert Maths button, and it'll pop into your document wherever you've put it. Okay, so we've got lovely, digital, clean, easy to read maths, and it's sort of very basic form. There are two other input methods that a student might choose to use, and they are the handwriting tool, which is this little one. Now, I'm using a mouse here, so my handwriting will be a little bit dodgy, but you can imagine if you have a Chromebook with a stylus, this suddenly becomes much easier. If a student prefers to handwrite, if they work best with their scribblings and they want to do a whole complex page of working out, they can do it on their screen and they can insert it that way. And that might work really well for a student who's who needs to sort of think it all through and work it all out. And obviously in maths, you want to see the working out most of the time as well. So that's going to work really well for them if they are happier handwriting than they are using the computer. But it's also allowing you to then still get it in that digital format, still share it through Classroom or whatever way you're sharing it, and still do everything else digitally. And it's making it neat and tidy. It won't worry about scribbles. It won't worry about any of that. It's going to take that really nicely and pop it again just into the document in the same way. The final way to input maths is a speech input. So it's a little record button. It doesn't matter what accent you have. I can say that as a Northern Irish person. It doesn't matter if you hum and ha a bit. It'll ignore all of that. You record your voice and it will create the maths for you, and it recognizes all of the usual maths commands and the maths concepts and so on. It's built to recognize maths. Okay, so that's instantly given your students 3 ways of creating their maths, of creating their answers, and of inserting them into whatever the document is. In terms of helping them to access the maths, there are a few different little tools to show. For example, the screenshot reader. The screenshot reader is there for any of your students who struggle with reading maths. So they get this paper and they see this equation and they don't really know where to start with it. They can simply use the screenshot reader, draw a little box around that, and it will read
7x plus 6 is greater than 1 plus 2x.
I hope you could hear that okay. And it reads it perfectly. It understands the symbols. It understands the signs. So again, that's going to help your students to access maths wherever it might be. And I'll show you a few different things as we go through what that looks like on an exam paper, for example, what that looks like maybe in a video or on a piece of handwriting. That screenshot reader is a great tool. We've also got Equatio Mobile. And again, I'll show you a little bit more on that, I think, a little bit later on. But that's allowing a student to use their mobile to capture maths wherever they are. So should that be, again, from handwriting? Should that be, again, their voice? If they're just out and about or they're watching, some YouTube videos to help them with their maths, whatever it might be, they can use Equatio Mobile. It'll tie in with whatever they're working on in class and let them pull that all together. There are 2 other tools just to mention, and then I'm going to show you the big one. A LaTeX editor is there. Again, that's very higher level. Perhaps you as a teacher might use LaTeX. It's there for you if you need it. Most students probably won't, but potentially at sort of further higher education they might. And there's a graph editor that allows you to solve a formula using a straight line graph or a line graph, sorry. So that's built in as well. So just to make you aware of that. Again, I can go into all of these in more detail in a more personalized demo at a later stage. The real place where a lot of the exploration happens and a lot of the imagery and a lot of that visual stuff that I've talked about happens is in what's called Mathspace. And if I open Mathspace now, it's kind of an online canvas, kind of an area where a student can go in, access loads of tools, do loads of work, have lots of fun, play around, and see what they can find. So for example, the first question I think on that little paper that I was just looking at was to do with a circle with a circumference of 40 meters. So a student can use Mathspace to do some drawings and do some calculations and figure it out. You'll see at the bottom here, we've still got the same toolbar, but just with a couple of extra tools added in. There's a freehand drawing tool added in, and there are a couple of shapes options. And if I click just on the shapes, you'll see that here's where I can draw a circle very quickly and easily. I can label it whatever way I want, handwriting or type, whatever I want. I can start to figure out my area equals pi r squared, I believe. If I've got that wrong, we'll know we're in trouble. You can insert that in so their student can start to sort of make sense and do their workings out, figure out their radius, draw a straight line, do all of that, do all of their calculations, scribble away. And then when they've got their answer and they want to put it back into this original document, they simply insert it, and that whole thing, picture and all, will go back in to the question paper. Okay, so it's nice for them to sort of play around and have lots of different ways of looking that up. And if I just really quickly, and then we'll move on to the next question because we will come back to Mathspace later, but I'll just really quickly show you the kind of number of tools that there are in Mathspace, because this is very relevant to making maths visual. You've got all of your shapes, you've got coin banks, you've got all sorts of fun stuff, tangrams, pattern blocks, 3D shapes, tens, frame blocks, base 10 blocks, counting rods, Venn diagrams, very important, all sorts of bits and pieces in here. And then on down, you've got lots of fun shapes and little characters and there's so much here that you can do. And I'll show you that as I go on, to make maths visual, to make it fun, or students can use to design their own little memory prompts or whatever it might be, and their own examples. I'm still scrolling. I'm still talking. Fraction circles, fraction lines, all of those things. We're going to look at some of those now in a little bit more detail, but that's just to give you an idea of what exists in Mathspace. So that's a quick look at what Equatio does to answer Shan's question. What does it do? It provides your students with several different ways of creating maths. It provides them with lots of different ways of exploring maths. It provides any who perhaps have additional needs with ways of hearing the maths read aloud, seeing it in a different way, any of those kind of things. That's what Equatio does, if that has answered that question.
Excellent. Yeah, well, hopefully, Jan, hopefully that's given you an introduction to exactly what Equatio can do. Certainly, and I would say that introduction, because there's a lot more to come, I suppose. That there's a lot of functionality, as you saw with that ever and never-ending scroll there with all the different things we can insert. Rodri's question, I believe, is next. Rodri's numeracy in Key Stage 2. Again, I think it's come off one of our tweets where we were saying we were going to, really show the visual side of maths. Wants to know how we can visualize maths.
Yeah, and it's funny because this is something that I just feel is so important to me, and I don't know if that's because I was never particularly good at maths. And I really feel like, as you probably all know, and you probably all have students in your classroom that sit there and go, I'll never need this. I'll never need to know this. And I absolutely remember saying that. And I had a wonderful GCSE and worked, and he got me through my GCSEs. But I could just remember going, I'm never going to need any of this. My first job out of university, my first big job, and I was in it for a long time, was working for a manufacturing company. I did languages, as I said. I worked in international sales, and part of that job was shipping huge sheets of stuff all around the world, huge sheets of plastic. So this could have been, 12-meter sheets of plastic or 6-meter sheets of plastic all around the world. I sold it first, but I also had to figure out how we were going to get it there, how we were going to optimize the space in a 40-foot container. And I had to sit and draw it out every time I sat. I drew it out. I put the measurements. I figured out what would fit beside what, both widthways and lengthways. I did all of that myself. And I suddenly went, this is why I needed to understand things like area. And, and I couldn't, as a 15-year-old or 16-year-old, I could not see that I would ever need that. And I just think, when I think about how I worked that out, and I had to draw it, and I had to visualize it, and I had to write all the numbers in, that's why I think visualizing maths is so important for people that it maybe just doesn't come naturally to. It didn't come naturally to me in theory, but once I knew what I was trying to do, and once I knew what I was trying to figure out, and once I had an angry customer in Costa Rica saying, we're not paying for this container unless you get more in it, I certainly was able to figure it all out then. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. How do we help students to make sense of this? And also, I think it just does help engage them. It makes it more fun. So there are loads of ways to do it. I'm just going to show you 2 quick ways with those Mathspaces that I was talking about a minute ago, and they will hopefully again show you what you can sort of build on then, because these are probably fairly basic, but they're going to give you an idea of how you can use all of those manipulatives and so on to build on them. So this is my first example. So as I said a moment ago, you've got things like coin banks and base 10 blocks in those manipulatives, in that manipulatives area, that shapes area of Mathspace. So here's a perfect example of the kind of activity that you could give your students to do. Getting them to use coins. I have a 4-year-old daughter. She recently got a toy with like a toy cash register, and she was like, "What are these?" when she held up the coins, because she always sees me swiping a card. And at some point she will have to learn about coins, and this is a really great way, without you having any issues with how many sets of resources you have in your classroom. Every student can have this exact Mathspace, and they can do this exercise in their own time. So obviously they're going to know the value of this, or they're going to figure out the value of this is £1, or maybe that half of 100 is 50, whatever way they decide to do it. They can just move these coins and they can get to where they need to be. So hopefully they'll end up with something a little bit like this. And that exercise is done just like that. But it has made sense to them because they can picture it, they can visualize it. They can count on the screen, whatever way they need to do it, it makes sense to them. So those kind of activities for learning those kind of concepts are just so helpful. And I used these coins over the first lockdown. My niece was struggling with currency, and I actually did these sorts of things for her to help her because she was stuck at home, and a lot of us don't have that much cash in our wallets and purses anymore. So it was just a great way to go through that with her. Also, something like this activity, these two kids, they share 20 sweets, ratio 3-2. That would have meant nothing to me. Do this in a ratio of 3-2. But now you can start to go, okay, so she gets 3 every time he gets 2. So I can start to put another 3 in there. Oh, let me just do that. They're hidden. There we go. So I can start to move the sweets in, and the same over here. Let's see, they're not hidden there. So every time she gets 3, he gets 2. There we go. Now another 3, 1, 2, 3. And at the end, I count them up, and suddenly it starts to make sense in my head. And I can make my own notes here. I can write down whatever I need to write down. It starts to make sense because I can picture it and because I can divide them out. So just little, really simple exercises like that suddenly are helping students to understand, first of all, why they might ever need this in the real world, or what it means in the real world, and also just to help them visualize it and play around and figure out the way that works best for them to answer this question.
Excellent.
So that 2 little examples there. We're going to see more. There'll be more visualization as we go through, but
definitely that Rodri's question there very much lends itself to the next one as well. And certainly for me, I can see, the gamification almost, that you can bring into it and making it more fun. I would have much rather done activities like that myself. I probably would now than reading worksheets and very traditional methods of teaching things like that. And I certainly would have worked that ratios task in particular out far quicker using that method in the digital way than doing it mentally, without any resources. Excellent. Okay, Sam, like I said, similar one, looking about engaging and enthusiastic, I suppose, approaches to numeracy-based tasks and motivating the pupils to get involved.
Yeah, so again, hopefully the former answer started to sort of show some of that. Motivating students to be engaged is, across every subject, it can be a thing, but definitely in maths. And I think a huge part of it is that not understanding context, not understanding why I would ever need to know this. So that's going to be part of it. And also just giving students the independence to choose their own way of figuring things out, I think can be really useful. And I know that was, again, not to harp on about my experiences, but, my dad was very mathematical. And he knew one way of doing things, and he understood it, and he got it. And I came home with homeworks, and his way didn't make any sense to me. So therefore, we usually ended up fighting, to be honest. And he'd be going, "But why do you not understand?" And I was saying, "I don't know. I just don't." So there was no engagement for me because I didn't understand what he was trying to teach me. And until I got that GCSE teacher who was very, very good at explaining all of those things to me and finding, trying that's it started to fall into place. So I think, and then you feel more motivated because you feel proud of yourself. You feel like you've got somewhere and you feel like you actually understand that concept. So all of those things are kind of linked, and certainly letting a student work things out for themselves in the way that works best for them is a big thing. So I'll pop back into that Mathspace and have another look. Let's see what my next example is. So this one, for example, so this is showing, it's very simple again, but it is going to show you how, if you ask a student to represent what 1/4 means, that there are 4 ways that I have thought of straight off the bat for them to do that. So they can go into Mathspace and they can say, what does this look like for me? Let me try a few things. Let me see what makes sense for me. And they can choose the one that makes sense for them, rather than you telling them one way in which they have to do it. And I think instantly that helps to engage them a lot more. So they want to represent 1/4 on a fraction bar, for example. Over here, we've got this little drop-down menu for any shapes and so on that are built into to Equatio. So you can see here, we've got a fraction bar with 4 segments, and at the minute 4 segments are shaded, but the student can represent 1/4 by taking that shaded segment down to just 1. And they can click insert, and that can go back into the maths, and they've answered your question. Same with the circle. They're gonna shade just 1 of the segments of the circle. They've got a number line here. How do we show 1/4 on a number line? I mean, you could just do this. You know, a little arrow, or you could do a nicer one than I've managed to do. You could write it, you know. So there, straight off the bat, is 4 ways of representing 1/4. Whoops. And that allows the student to do it in the way that works for them. That's a very simple example, but you get where I'm coming from with that. As well. Also things like allowing them to explore a little bit more. So for a lot of students, they might find something like YouTube videos, which can be very helpful, or, you know, the bite-size, BBC bite-size, or some of those kind of things. They can be really helpful for helping students to understand concepts, but they might find that quite daunting because it's a whole lot of maths and it's a whole lot of whatever, and they're not quite sure what's going on. Allowing them to engage with that kind of content can be really helpful as well. So this is a GCSE maths revision video with some algebra on it. The student can come in here. They've still got their toolbar. They can use their screenshot reader to perhaps have this read aloud. Even though it's handwritten, it will still read it aloud.
3x equals -5.
And then they can, you know, take that, put it into their own document, play around with it, have a go at this themselves while they're watching it at the same time, you know, by having it in, you know, by having their equation editor open or having a document open, that they can sort of do it at the same time, maybe start to make sense. It's helping them to engage with all that kind of content, rather than just sitting and watching something that's going in one ear and out the other because it doesn't actually make any sense to them. Things like that.
It's accurate. Do not write.
The other thing to show you at this stage is Equatio Mobile, which I mentioned at the start. I think most students like to be told that they can use their mobile instead of being told to put it away. So this is a little app that allows them to do maths when they're away from their computer, to do maths when they're out in the street. If they're even thinking about it, I don't know how many students are thinking about their maths homework on the bus or on the way home, but if something comes to them, that they can really quickly do that on their mobile and have it link up with their work whenever they get home to look at it. And it's just, they'll have a bit of fun with it as well. And again, that thing, they'll really work on a phone, you know. Let's see. So this is a very short video. It's 30 seconds, no sound, but it's just going to show you some of the options with the mobile app. So you've got 3 tools. You've got handwriting, voice input, or photos. So you'll see, first of all, a student can just be handwriting the same way as they can be doing with on the screen. If they've got a touchscreen device, but they might not, it'll take their maths, it'll make it digital. Same with the spoken word, they just record themselves, and it's going to make a lovely little piece of accurate maths to go in. Again, they can save it or they can insert it to their document. Again, they might have some scribblings, or they might have seen something, they take a photo of it, and they get it popped in to their work that way too. So there's so many options. It's a very quick video, but there are loads of just little fun ways with Equatio Mobile that they can engage as well. And as I say, even if they're just doing it for a bit of fun, you know, it's helping them engage, isn't it? And it's getting them interested in something. So that is Equatio Mobile. So I hope I've answered that question for Sam.
Your handwriting using your mouse is so much better than mine. I'm hopeless.
It's not easy.
I needed stylus. No, that's great.
It's not easy at all.
And Sam, hopefully that's given you a few more ideas now then for engaging and motivating your pupils right across the board. I think the mobile one, particularly, you know, with schools who've got mobile phone policies, that already is a quick win. Allowing them to use their phones in a maths lesson, you know, for some pupils that would, you know, multiply it several times probably their engagement levels straight away. That's just one, but excellent. Thank you, Sam. Next is a returning question provider. Joseph joined us for the Read and Write and Orbit Note webinar a fortnight ago, and it's almost copy and paste question. How could Equatio, how can the functionality be utilized in an exam environment?
Yeah, so this is the $1 million question, and this is the hot off the press answer, which is that up until this year, I think possibly October, November of this academic year, so just before Christmas, the answer was you can't. The answer now is you can, with some limitations, obviously. As we all know, the things that you're allowed to use in exams have to be quite tightly monitored and locked down, and you just can't have students using whatever they want in an exam situation. But Equatio is now able to be used in an exam, and I'm just going to pop back into my slides to show you how, actually, because as I say, this is quite new. So just to sort of show you what JCQ have been saying about exams. So yes, Equatio for exams, secure, approved, and accurate. What JCQ access arrangements say now is that a computer reader may be used to decode symbols and unit abbreviations in maths and science examinations for candidates who require this in order to access the assessment, and where it reflects the candidate's current and normal way of working. That normal way of working is always the sort of the go-to expression. The same for any kind of access arrangement. You have to be able to demonstrate that this is how a student works best, and this is how they have worked throughout the year. So with that sort of taken into consideration, they are allowed one of the features currently, which is this little one at the bottom, which is the screenshot reader. So I've shown that a couple of times. That's the one that will take the maths text and read it aloud, and it reads it very accurately. Other online reader or not online, other computer reader solutions will not read maths accurately. That includes our own Read and Write, which is used very widely for exams, for any other kind of text, but it won't read the maths accurately. It's not a maths engine, I suppose. So screenshot reader will. It's natural speech. There's a certain amount of control the student has over how quickly, how fast it's reading. And they can control how often they get it repeated. And that's one of the key things with any exam solution, is it takes away any shame, any embarrassment that a student might have. So they will not ask a person to repeat an equation or a fraction or something 16 times, but they can hit play 16 times, and that's where they become more independent, and that's where they get their power from. So under those circumstances, with the access arrangement, the normal way of working, Equatio can be used for exams. I'm going to show you in a little minute just on an exam paper, but Read and Write and Equatio together. We're not looking at Read and Write today. If you want to learn a little bit about Read and Write, last week's was all about Read and Write, so you'll get the link for that, and please do have a watch at that and see what they say about exams in terms of that. But Read and Write will read the text, it will read everything else that's important. There are other tools built into Read and Write which can be used in exams, and Equatio will provide the maths. So together they're the sort of total reading solution for exams. So with that being said, I'm going to open them and let you have a look at them on an exam paper. So Read and Write and Equatio. Read and Write will open at the top. Equatio will open at the bottom of my screen. And I'll just give you an idea of how the exam will look through that. So we've got Read and Write at the top. We've got Equatio at the bottom. Now imagine the Equatio toolbar has everything removed except for the screenshot reader, okay? And this is already set up for exams. This toolbar is already set up for exams. So if I just open an exam paper now, okay, maths exam paper. Read and write can be used to read any of this text, the questions, anything that comes in a text format. Read and write can be used to read it. And then all the student has to do is pop down here to switch on their screenshot reader to get it to read the maths.
X equals -13.
And as they'll have been using Equatio already in their classroom and potentially also using read and write, that will be no problem for them to go between the two. Read and write has other things that built into it that are very important for exams, things like a screen mask for a student who qualifies for something like that. The highlighters, they can use those colored highlighters.
Solve x8 equals 5.
Keep doing that. I keep forgetting to switch it off when I've started. They can use the colored highlighters, you know, which students are obviously allowed. They're allowed highlighters in an exam. There are lots of bits and pieces in read and write that can be used for an exam, but the hard part for a maths exam was always getting the maths read. So this was a bit of a groundbreaking change, and a lot of maths teachers got quite excited about that. So hopefully that will also be of interest to you and to any exams officers like Joseph as well.
Fab. I think, you know, going back to when I was in school, whether they were classmates or even myself, I think that would have been such a valuable tool to have access to. It leads us very nicely on. It was almost done on purpose into our accessibility specific questions, looking at pupils with additional learning needs that have come in from Kelly. Kelly's an ALNCO or a SENCO outside of Wales. How can Equatio support that personalised learning for additional learning needs? So I think you've covered a lot of it. Any additional things you'd suggest Kelly utilise?
I was thinking, I think I've maybe already sort of half answered this a little unintentionally, but like any of those things that we've looked at, how we make it visual, how we make it make sense, how we make it personal to the student and the way that they learn, the way that their brain works best. All of that we've already sort of looked at, and that all comes into play, doesn't it, when it comes to additional learning needs or special education needs. If we take another look just back at one of those documents, and we'll just make sure that we've covered everything. So you've got all of the input methods. Again, predictive text can be really important for students with additional learning needs. It may be that may be for mobility reasons. It may be for reasons of something like dyslexia, anything like that. Predictive text can be super useful. The handwriting versus the dictation, you know, and again, we looked at this a lot last week in the read and write demo, how important dictation can be for a student who's got everything in their head, but whether for a physical reason or whatever it might be, they struggle to get it down on paper. So enabling them to dictate can be really, really useful. Just anything that allows those students to study that little bit more independently, that little bit more in a little bit more of a personalized way. All of that is really important when it comes to additional learning needs. They can do it how they like. They can do it as and when they like. There's no difference if they're in a mainstream class. There's no difference between them and their peers because everyone has Equatio and everyone will use it in their own way. So they will be able to access the tools without any shame or without any sense of feeling different. And also there's no kind of having to share resources or, you know, they've had that for so much longer than the other students, which again can mark them out as different. So all of those things are kind of benefits. I think it's worth popping into the menu as well, just to let you see some of the options that are available for some of your students. So if you click on the Equatio symbol down at the bottom, this little menu will appear. And in the options, there are just a few things that will come in handy potentially for some of your ALN students. Things like the font size. For any students with any kind of visual difficulty or disturbance, we've got a choice of font sizes. I have it set on regular for today, but that can be changed. Things can be resized as well in Mathspace or in the text, just in ordinary Equatio things. Everything looks like first off. That's when you would change the font size. You can also switch off things that students don't need, and that can be important in terms of overloading overwhelming, too much information, easily distracted. You know, if your student is never going to be using this for chemistry, you know, perhaps lower down in the school, or perhaps even up A level, they're doing maths, but they're not doing science, well, then you can turn off the science ones. Or actually, if you go into toolbar options, you can turn off any of the features that they're not going to use. So if they're really just here because of the speech input, and that's primarily what they're going to be using, well, then just toggle everything else off. And then that makes the toolbar nice and straightforward for them. And they don't have any confusion, and they don't have any sort of stress or anything to distract. The other thing that's just popped into my mind as well, I've talked about font size. You can also change the color of the font, which can be quite important for some. So for example, I'll just do a little bit of typing, and then we've got this little text color section. And again, there may be a color that works better for some of your students, that appears brighter, looks easier for them, whatever it might be. They can do that, and that will be helpful as well. And there are lots of little bits, even just in Equation Editor, there are favorites and little sort of quick access tools and so on, where maybe they don't even have to use the predictive text. They can actually come in here and find the pi symbol, for example. You can save it to their favorites. So if they're studying a particular topic, that's very easy access. It's fewer clicks. They just come to their favorites, they find what it is they need, and they go back. So there are lots of little tweaks and little things like that we can do. And then there's all that sort of general stuff that I talked about at the start as well. There's lots going on for your ALN students.
It certainly is, yeah, definitely. And you've covered it there, but for me, the dictation, and you know, I wouldn't know my symbol. I probably wouldn't know them now, let alone when I was in school. You know, the way that they can dictate, and the predictive text as well. I think that's a really nice feature to show pupils who are starting their, you know, pies and their ratios and things like that. You know, as a non-math specialist, I wouldn't certainly know, but I think on the favourites category sort of section as well, I think it'd be fantastic use. Hopefully, Kelly, that will help with some of the students you're supporting. Excellent. Carly's question next then. So Carly is a long-time user of Equatio in a Google school that's doing really well using the Google Workspace. So is accomplished user. I know as Carly's pushed it out to a number of her colleagues, and the school are utilising it really well. And I think what Carly was looking for was to sort of something for her to go back and show to her colleagues. Something, you know, I know you've shown some of the new things, but what would you recommend to make things even more fun? Even more fun.
Even fun. That's great. It's already fun. It's already fun. No, that's a great question. And from my experience, I can show where certain things are at in Equatio, and then teachers are like, oh, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. So I have seen some really inventive stuff done with Equatio. I have seen escape rooms. I have seen treasure island maps. I have seen like games of battleships and Connect 4 and those kind of things. You can create all of those things really, really easily with Equatio. And we've got some resources that we can share as well. So I'll just show you the kind of things that that some of our team or some of our teacher friends have come up with using Equatio. If we had time, we could do an escape room. That would be so much fun, but I don't think we'll have time today. But let me just pop in to, so for example, I mean, again, we'll start with sort of slightly more basic ones, but you know, these kind of little activities that kids just love, like a bingo game or this kind of a game where you've just created a little pile of cards here and they have to put them in wherever they should go. This is where I should be paying attention. I might get it wrong. But you know, you can really easily do a bingo game or something like this. You can use all of those little shapes that I showed you at the start. Right down at the bottom, there were all sorts of little airplanes and cars and you know, hot air balloons. You know, you can use those to make them more visual, more fun. But those are sort of really easy, quick, easy ways. Phil, you've got 5 minutes left at the end of your lesson. Here you go. Have a go at this. This will be a bit of fun. Do it as a class activity. This one kind of blew my mind when I saw it the other day. This was a new one to me, but you know, create your own optical art using your sort of your colors and your shading and so on. But we've also got things like, you know, this was one that I came across that I thought was lovely. And again, it's very easy to do. You know, get your students to make their own jack-o'-lanterns, but you're trying to get them to count a bit as well. They can copy and paste this as many times as they want if they want to, or they can just play about with putting the little bits on. You know, little sort of topical ways of doing something a bit fun and very visual again. And we've got some of these resources, as I said. We've got like sort of for Pi Day, we did this. So that was in March, back in March. You know, you can import pictures. I don't think I'd shown you that actually, but you can import stuff into a Mathspace as well. So photos or pictures or whatever. So here we've done sort of exercises with pizza, with desserts. My favorite was this one where you're giving students, I hope you can see that clearly enough, you're giving students toppings to put on a pie. And, you know, it's to do with fractions. Like, that's so easy to create in Mathspace, but it's good fun. And they'll enjoy, you know, doing their marshmallows and so on. And, you know, so that's the kind of thing that we'll be releasing on our blog that might just help give you some new ideas, some different ways of doing things. We did this one for Halloween. This was from our US office. And that's where the little jack-o'-lantern one came from, actually. And, you know, right up to, you know, quite high, sort of the upper end of the school. There's lots of little different activities in there as well. So we do sometimes release those kind of things, but I tend to find that once a student gets going, or once a teacher gets going with it, they will find far more than I could ever create. And once students get going with it, they will find far more than we can ever create too. They usually find all of those little fun bits and pieces first. But, you know, and again, I've scraped the surface today. I've scratched the surface of this today, but there are colors. There are, I actually had a lovely little one with rocket ships and cars that I meant to show. You know, there just are loads of things that are very colorful, very visual. You can make them really quickly into a game with your students and get them all engaged, whether they're doing it on their own device or whether, you know, they're working off your whiteboard. There's a lot of fun stuff that they can do there.
Well, that's blown my mind. The dessert toppings are such a clever way of utilizing the functionality. I love that. I think, again, going back to Carly's question, even more fun. I think that's a great way to utilize, and that could be in any subject capacity. You know, you bring in numeracy into every subject in a thematic way by being quite creative and innovative with it. And again, it's teed you up a treat here for the next question as well. So Dylan is a DT teacher, and I suppose there's probably multiple ways of getting in DT. I'm thinking woodwork and things like that for measurements, but and how he could use it in how he could use Equatio in his subject.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that probably every teacher could use this at some point for creating a resource, no matter what their subject is. Should it be French? Should it be English? Should it be whatever? Because there are lots of little bits and pieces, but certainly any subject that involves diagrams, shapes, circuits, those kind of things. I'll actually pop back in to Mathspace there just to make sure that I showed that, because on down a little bit here, there are things like light bulbs and resistors and all of those kind of things. So that could come in really handy for any of those kind of subjects. There's all of the 3D shapes. And there's so much the students can do with those. And that's what you know, we don't have time to go into today, but there's so much that a student can do in terms of color, in terms of size, in terms of, you know, putting things onto shapes that they've already created. There's just an awful lot. And, you know, just to get your good straight lines and your measurements and so on, there's lots in there, I would say, for anyone who's creating any kind of resource, but certainly for subjects like technology design, the sciences, any of those kind of things where drawings and diagrams are a huge part of what you do. Did I share my screen there?
Didn't come up now. It doesn't matter. You've talked
okay,
on
right. Really quick. Sorry, I just realized as I'd shown you all of that lovely stuff that I wasn't showing it at all. So let's try that again. Yes, so in Smart Shapes, if I go down, so down here, there's the light bulbs and so on, batteries and so on that I was talking about there. That might help with some of those kind of things, and all of the 3D shapes, all of the, you know, even lenses and mirrors and things like that. That's all going to come in really useful to any of those kind of subjects. Sorry about that.
No, it makes sense. I'm thinking of myself now. I'm working quite closely with a PE department at the moment. It hadn't really crossed my mind, but I'm thinking, you know, numeracy into PE is so easy, I suppose, with things like that. You know, what percentage of the pitch is X, Y, and Z? You know, those sorts of conversations then can happen to, particularly here in Wales, with the, you know, the numeracy being so high on the agenda, I suppose, in the curriculum. It can very easily lend itself to
pulling it in
and themes, and you're not forcing it in. You're doing it but in context as well.
Yeah,
Quite.
and they don't, sometimes they don't even know, and that's one of the best ways to learn, isn't it? Again, you know, with my daughter, some of the little, you know, orchard toys games and so on that we play, they're all about maths, but she doesn't know that. She's just having fun.
Exactly.
And I think that it's a really good way to introduce some of those concepts when kids aren't even being told this is maths, but you know, but it is. And same with the pie one, any of those kind of things. It's a bit of fun, but they're learning.
Fantastic. Fair play. Another webinar successfully answered all the questions that were thrown at you. Thank you for that. Thank you, obviously, to everybody for providing those questions. The final one, then, I suppose, everyone's heard about what it can do and how you can do it and things like that. How can we get signed up, Alison? What's the best way to get as an individual or as a school?
Yep. So yeah, email me. It's the easiest way. So anything at all, you want to find out more, you want to see any of that again, or you want to see any of that in more detail, you want to ask me questions about some of our other solutions, whatever it is, you can just send me an email, a.woodrow@texthelp.com. Put your school name even just in as the title, and then I'll get in touch with you and we'll have a chat. Also, we kind of love giving stuff away for free. We just do. So
everyone loves
if you want a free, if you would like a free trial of Equatio or Read and Write or both or anything else, again, just send the title free trial and send it to me and I will get you sorted out. That is no problem at all. I'm here to help.
Finally, then, I suppose, from Aspire to Be perspective, we have an online platform that's got multiple courses. Sorry, there we go. Magic. AspireEd.online is the platform, and it's based on a subscription model where a school signs up and you have usernames and passwords for all your staff. So the QR code and the link are on screen there. But what I'm delighted to announce, I suppose, this afternoon is there are 2 brand new courses on the platform, one for Equatio, one for Read and Write. And basically, they're free. There's no need to have a subscription with those. Obviously, it'll give you a taste at how the platform runs. But if you wanted to learn even more about the 2 products, Equatio and Read and Write, there are courses available where you will see Alison, who you've got to know on today's webinar, on those courses. They're on demand. They're bite-sized. You can take your time to go through videos, you know, a couple of minutes every day, or you can sit and complete the whole tasks yourself if that's what you'd like to do. So the links to those, there's some bit.ly links on the slides there for Equatio and Read and Write, and I think it's a case of almost watch this space with regards to Orbit Note. I think Alison or the team certainly are potentially looking at an Orbit Note course as well. So you can see on screen there the QR codes and the bit.ly link. So simply type in that bit.ly/A to B raw or bit.ly/Equatio into your URL, your Omnibox at the top of your browser, and it'll take you through to the Aspire Ed platform where both of those courses are. All you need to do is join for free, and you can complete that on-demand training where, to be fair, Alison, you've done a really in-depth overview of all 3 platforms now, all 3 solutions, but there's a couple of extra little nuggets of gold, I suppose, for educators to take a look at. And I think with just over a minute and a half to spare, I think that's, included you. I nearly forgot. That included you is a project that I've developed over the last just over 2 years now. It's very focused on accessibility. And obviously, Orbit Note, Read and Write, and Equatio are featured heavily within the platform. That's includedyou.online to access that, where there's direct links to, for example, the Chrome Web Store extension tool to download everything we've spoken about today and on the last webinar. Completely free, no subscription required, no username and passwords on this one. Just take a look at the framework and find some fantastic accessibility tools, but definitely worth looking at the text help ones that are on there. Now I think we're at the close.
I think so.
Thank you very much for attending. Alison, thank you for your time and showing us an in-depth look at Equatio today. And again, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it?
a.woodrow@texthelp.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all on the next webinar series sometime soon.
Thank you all. That was great. Thanks so much, Ryan, as well. Bye.
Ta-ra.